Hello! In this video, we're going to see an example of show antecedent in action. So let's take a look at the problem. We'll show our conclusion. We'll make our indirect assumption. In the examples I was doing in the previous video to sort of introduce the show ant idea, I skipped the indirect assumption, but that was for the sake of demonstration, and in general, always make an assumption. Good, we've got all our premises in. What shall we do? Well, we look for rule applications. 2 and 4, not useful by themselves. 5, well, we don't have Q, we don't have not P, and therefore we're not in a position to do MP or MT with line 5. Looking at line 3, we do not have negation of P and Q, so we can't do MP, and we don't have negation of R and S, and so we cannot do MT. We can't do anything with any of our lines. Our derivation is stuck, and therefore we should do a subderivation. We cannot do show consequent because we're not trying to show a conditional. We cannot do show on negation because we do not have any negations. Well, that's not quite true. We have a negation on line 4, but that's a negation of a sentence letter. We do show a negation with negations of conditionals or conjunctions, and we don't have any of those. Line 3 is not the negation of a conditional. Line 3 is a conditional whose antecedent is a negation. So show a negation is not relevant because it's not a negated conditional. It's a conditional. So we should do our new, use our new subderivation strategy, show ant. So we want to show an antecedent. So we need to decide what, so we need to say, well, are there opportunities to do it? And there are. We could do show ant of 3. And we could also do show ant of 5. Which should we do? Which should we do? Well, for several reasons, we should do show ant of 3. We should do line 6. This is our preferred subderivation. Why? Well, first of all, let's first, we can look and see what they'll get for us. This, and let's actually collapse these and make that just easier to look at. Good. So if we did show Q, well, we would be able to do modus ponens with 6 and 12 giving us 5. Whoops, with 5 and 12, giving us not P, which we would do what with? Dunno. With 6, we could get if R then S. Can we use if R then S? Well, we can't use the box and cancel, which we'd like to be able to box and cancel right away, but we can't. But we can get there quickly because we can do modus ponens with 2 and 8. And that gives us S, which contradicts line 4 for an indirect derivation. And so we can see that this one is preferable, at least in the sense that if we complete it, then we can complete the whole derivation afterwards, whereas this just gives us not P, and it's not clear what we would do with not P. There are things we could do, but basically we'd actually just end up doing this. So in this case, we can see that show ant of 3 is preferable. Also, in general, when you're trying to decide if you have multiple show ants and you're trying to decide which one to do, you might just guess. But if one is part of a bigger conditional, or if one is a bigger antecedent, then that's the preferred one to do. And this is better than show Q for both of those reasons. This is a bigger conditional than this, so we prefer doing show ant with it. And this is bigger than that, and that's another reason to prefer doing subderivation with it. So when you have the choice of doing multiple show ants, you might just have to try one and see what happens. But if one is part of a bigger conditional, or if one is bigger substantially, then choose that one. So let's go ahead and give this subderivation a shot. It's the negation of a conjunction, so we should make an indirect assumption, giving us P and Q. Well, we can split that up. Can we do anything with these two? Actually, we can. 9 and 5, right? 9 is the antecedent of 5, and so we can apply modus ponens, giving us negation P, which, hey, contradicts line 8. That's really handy. What a nice coincidence. It's not a coincidence, and actually I'll explain why in a second, but let's finish the derivation first. So now we can, if we forgot why we did this subderivation, then we can look at our shortcut command over here, and it tells us, oh, this or this thing that we completed is the antecedent of that, and that means that we can apply modus ponens, and oh look, 2 and 12, giving us a contradiction with the S and the not S. What's happening here is that it turns out that if this is true, that this and this, they're equivalent. They're different ways of saying the same thing. And in particular, the form that's relevant for us is if this is true, then so is that. If this conditional is true, then P and Q has got to be false. Let's think about why that is. If P and Q were true, then Q would be true, but given this conditional, not P would be true. But if P and Q is true, then also P would be true. So if this is true, then, right, is it possible for both Q and P, for both P and Q to be true? No, they can't both be true, because if they were, then Q would be true, and then P would be both true and false, and that's not possible. And so if this is true, then P and Q is actually false. And that's why we can get from 5 to here. If we look at this derivation, this subderivation, we see, oh, there's an indirect derivation from there, or our assumption, excuse me, and we split it up. And then the only line that's not from the assumption that we interact with is line 5, the conditional here. And that's us getting from this to that, in essence. So that's why this works. So there's an example of show antecedent. And we remember when you have an option of multiple show antecedents, if one is part of a bigger conditional or is the antecedent is bigger, choose that one. This one is better for both reasons. And you can also think about, well, what would happen if I were to complete this subderivation versus that subderivation? Which would I prefer? And those are various considerations you might take into account when trying to decide which show ant to do when you're in a situation where you have multiple ones. Good, we'll look at some more examples in our next videos.